Well, good evening. I'm going to get started here, and then, we'll have some time for some questions, and I'll try to answer things as best I can. Thank you for joining me tonight for this presentation. My name is Susan Russo, and I will be sharing with you information about the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, also known as CEJA. This is the groundbreaking bill that Illinois passed in September 21. This new law is one of the first of its kind in the United States, and it puts Illinois at the forefront of addressing climate change, including the challenges and opportunities that climate change presents. This presentation will cover a lot of ground, most of it that is probably unfamiliar to many of you. I will take questions at the end, but do please remember that I am an active community member, not a policy expert. The new law is so big, it is over 900 pages long, that few people are experts on all of it. And I won't necessarily know the answers to your questions, but I will work to get you answers that I don't have. Also, please remember that bills this big can take years to implement. Most of the policies that implement this new law are not yet in place, and we don't have an exact timeline for when they will be in place. I know this can be frustrating, but at the end of the presentation, I will share some resources and suggest some action that you can take. That having been said, my goals this evening are threefold: to give you a basic understanding of what is in CEJA, an appreciation for the role that communities and everyday people can and should play in shaping policy and passing bills, and ways that you can take action to continue to advance climate and equity in Illinois. First, I want to identify the community that was behind the passing of CEJA. This community is known as the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition and is made up of many environmental advocacy organizations, businesses, community leaders, consumer advocates, environmental justice groups, faith-based organizations, and student organizations. I am a member of three of these organizations: the League of Women Voters of Illinois, the Sierra Club of Illinois, and Prairie Rivers Network. These groups are continuing to work together to improve public health and the environment and protect consumers and create clean jobs across the state with a focus on equity. I also want to share a bit about me and how I got involved in this work. I have been a resident of Batavia for 37 years and encouraged the Batavia City Council to support the passage of CEJA. Following my retirement from the practice of law earlier this year, I decided to focus my interests and energies on confronting the challenges of climate change. I also volunteered to do this presentation to help the Clean Jobs Coalition get the word out about CEJA. My two granddaughters are my reasons for doing this. I want a better world for them and all children to grow up in, and to become productive, healthy, and happy adults in a world that is healthier, cleaner, and more equitable. Before we dive into CEJA policy, I'm going to share a little bit about how the bill was passed. In September 21, Governor Pritzker made history by signing the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act at the Shed Aquarium in Chicago. CEJA is many times bolder on climate than any previous bill passed in Illinois. Additionally, the passage of CEJA makes Illinois a national leader in how comprehensive CEJA is and how it embodies equity into every policy. Passing such a game-changing bill was not easy. In 2016, Illinois had passed its first major law to address climate change, the Future Energy Jobs Act, also known as CEJA. This bill revived the clean energy economy in Illinois by setting goals for converting to renewable energy sources and improving energy efficiency. And it made initial investments in consumer resources and job training programs to make the clean energy economy more accessible to marginalized communities. In 2018, the Clean Jobs Coalition knew that CEJA was a first step, but Illinois couldn't stop there. It was time to start thinking about introducing a new bill. The coalition had big ideas and goals, wanting to get to 100% clean electricity, electrifying transportation, investing even more in job training, and embedding equity more intentionally in all of Illinois' policies. The coalition knew that the most successful path to achieving these goals was grounding them in community needs and values. So during the summer of 2018, the coalition organized more than 60 community dialogues across Illinois to learn about people's needs, values, and vision for a clean energy economy in Illinois. Taking time to talk to communities all across the state slowed down the process, but it was important to craft a bill that actually met people's needs. That feedback directly influenced the writing of the initial bill, which was called the Clean Energy Jobs Act, which was introduced in March of 2019. That original bill was slightly different than the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act that eventually passed. Doesn't want to move. There we go. There's a delay, sorry. So the coalition also lobbied inside Springfield, leaning on years of relationship building to make sure legislators understood the issues and policies behind the bill and use their power to pass a bold and equitable climate bill. Why is it not advancing, Jean? Let's try this way. Okay, let's just go here. Okay, I'll do that. Okay. We also got the word out to traditional media and social media, from press conferences to Twitter storms, letters to the editor, and more. I was just going to get rid of that. Don't worry, okay. It's not showing up there. Sorry about that. Okay, and we negotiated. At one point, there were at least 6 bills on the table that addressed some or all of the issues contemplated by the Clean Energy Jobs Act. In Illinois, it is very rare that a bill that is introduced is the actual bill that is passed. The Clean Jobs Coalition had to make some compromises that they weren't happy with, but worked to make sure that as decisions were made, they were made together as a coalition. In the end, the coalition was able to win a lot in the final bill, thanks to the relentless organizing on the ground and elected officials who were environmental champions willing to hold their ground on some of our biggest demands. After all of the organizing, lobbying, and negotiating, the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act was eventually passed and signed into law by Governor Pritzker. So what did we win in the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act? We won a lot. CEJA sets clear and time-bound goals and creates reliable funding streams that will improve people's lives all across the state. CEJA invests over $80 million per year for workforce and contractor development programs. It invests 41 million per year in former fossil fuel communities and workers in those communities. It provides $380 million per year in new funding to get from 9% renewable energy today to 50% renewable energy by 2040. It achieves 100% carbon-free electricity by 2045, prioritizing environmental justice communities for pollution reduction. It commits to investments that will put 1 million electric vehicles on Illinois roads by 2030. And finally, CEJA ensures that 40% of the benefits and investments in solar power, electric vehicles, and the grid will go to communities traditionally left behind. The Climate and Equitable Jobs Act has 8 major components: carbon-free power, renewable energy, energy efficiency, electric transportation, inclusive financing, jobs and economic justice, utility accountability, and just transition. We are going to take a bit of a detour here because there is an important fact about St. Charles, Geneva, and Batavia that influences the impact of CEJA on the Tri-Cities communities. Because of this fact, we will also just concentrate on the first 4 components, the ones highlighted in green on the left side of the slide. So, did you know that St. Charles gets approximately 70% of its electricity from Prairie State Energy Campus and 30% from other sources, including renewable. Geneva gets approximately 70.5% of its electricity from Prairie State, about 20% from Next Era, which includes some renewables, about 8.5% from Settlers Hill landfill methane gas generation, and about 1% from a city-owned natural gas generation facility. And that natural gas facility is primarily a peaker plant for summer hours. And then finally, Batavia gets more than 100% of its electricity only from Prairie State Energy Campus. St. Charles, Geneva, and Batavia each own a part of Prairie State Energy Campus, a coal-burning power plant in southern Illinois. And yes, that is correct. Batavia is contractually obligated to buy more than 100% of its electricity needs from Prairie State. Each year, Batavia purchases 55 megawatts of electricity at retail price, delivers roughly 35 megawatts to its customers, and sells roughly 20 megawatts that it doesn't need or use at wholesale price. The difference between the retail and wholesale price is made up by a surcharge on all Batavia ratepayers. Prairie State is the biggest greenhouse gas emitter in Illinois and the 8th biggest emitter in the United States. It produces and dumps coal ash on a 750-acre landfill site in Washington County, Illinois. And for those of you who don't know acreage size, 750 acres is approximately the size of the west side of Batavia, from Batavia Avenue to Randall Road, and from Main Street to Mill Street, where the post office is. And each year, its pollutants contribute to the health problems, hospitalizations, and deaths of residents in and near the plant. Okay, we're going to turn now back to CEJA. So because Its carbon-free power requirements take into consideration how and where Illinois residents get their electricity. There are three ways we all get our electricity in Illinois. One is through the municipality. This includes St. Charles, Geneva, and Batavia. You can also get it through a cooperative. This is primarily for smaller communities in the central southern part of the state. Or you can get it through investor-owned utilities. And the two big ones in Illinois are Commonwealth Edison and Ameren. City councils and village boards of municipal utilities and the boards of cooperatives are not regulated by the Illinois Commerce Commission. This means that there is virtually no state or federal regulation of municipal and co-op grid planning requirements, consumer protections such as electricity pricing, energy efficiency mandates, and solar self-generation policies. The theory behind this lack of state and federal regulation is that elected officials of municipalities and the members of co-op boards will respond reasonably and responsibly to the energy needs, demands, and price tolerances of their respective residents and members. However, most residents in Illinois are either ComEd customers if they're in Northern Illinois or Ameren customers if they're in Central or Southern Illinois. The Illinois Commerce Commission has rate-making authority over these investor-owned electricity utilities. Most of CEJA's carbon-free power requirements apply to these investor-owned utilities, ComEd and Ameren. Prairie State Energy Campus is treated differently under CEJA because it operates outside the regulatory control of Illinois Commerce Commission. In addition to ramping up our clean energy production in the state, CEJA sets a clear timeline for getting fossil fuels off our electric grid. This is a critical component of addressing environmental justice and the climate crisis. During CEJA negotiations, the Clean Jobs Coalition fought hard to win the fastest possible timeline to retire fossil fuels from the electric grid in Illinois. This slide shows the mandated closures, closing dates for coal and gas plants that were won in CEJA. The dates in blue indicate the closing dates for private coal, oil, and gas plants. In general, these privately owned coal plants and gas plants will close by 2030. The dates in red are the target dates for emissions reduction and closure for public coal and gas plants. These reductions and closure dates apply to Prairie State Energy Campus. CEJA's goal is to have Prairie State reduce its carbon dioxide emissions by 45% by 2038 and shut down its operations by 2045. So, will Prairie State meet these deadlines? Or how will they meet these deadlines? The first and most logical option is to ramp down its production of electricity so that its greenhouse gas emissions are reduced by 45% by 2038 and to shut down its production by 2045. A second option is to retrofit the plant for carbon capture and sequestration. Prairie State is aggressively pursuing this option. However, there are several downsides that make this option very unattractive for consumers. Carbon capture is a process that has never been successfully implemented for a coal-fired power plant. It has been tried on 3 power plants, all smaller than Prairie State, and none of them have successfully captured more than 44% of the carbon dioxide they emit. This is less than the reductions by CEJA for Prairie State requiring them to get to 45% by 2038 and 100% by 2045. Second, Prairie State is looking to the federal government and private investors to pay for the carbon capture system. However, private investors are planning to recoup their costs through tax credits financed by taxpayers, and those tax credits were just enhanced in the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed, I believe, in August. So all of the costs of a carbon capture system will be financed by tax dollars, but all of the profits will be pocketed by private investors. Once captured, carbon dioxide must be compressed and transported by pipeline to underground storage facilities. These pipelines present inherent dangers to the residents who live near them. Fourth, carbon dioxide is sequestered in underground pore spaces located in central and southern Illinois. There are serious questions about the safety and stability of these sites, especially since they will need to be monitored for hundreds of years into the future. And finally, carbon dioxide has a commercial value for the extraction of sludgy, unusable oil, a process known as enhanced oil recovery. There is a good chance that Prairie State's captured carbon will be sold to oil companies so that they can extract more fossil fuels and put them on the market for burning. The second goal or achievement of CEJA is regarding ambitious nation-leading renewable energy provisions to get Illinois on a path to be powered by 100% clean energy. In Illinois, our largest renewable energy sources are solar and wind, but renewable energy also includes hydroelectric and geothermal. CEJA has set a goal to 50% renewable generation by 2040. It also creates financial incentives for wind and solar development. The level of incentive depends on how much electricity the project produces over 15 years and what type of project it is. CEJA builds on rooftop and community solar programs. It also creates and funds new programs, including solar on schools, projects led by equity eligible contractors, community solar projects that have community involvement, benefits, and ownership. But unfortunately, many of these programs are not available in communities with municipal utilities like St. Charles, Geneva, and Batavia. Remember that I said that St. Charles, Geneva, and Batavia own Prairie State Energy Campus. It is a bit more complicated than that because their ownership interests are created by memberships in power agencies and multiple contracts that create owner-like relationships. Ultimately, the cities are the parties that are liable for anything related to the power plant. Batavia and Geneva have their contracts with NIMPA, Northern Illinois Municipal Power Agency, and St. Charles has its contract with IMEA, Illinois Municipal Energy Agency. Because of these contracts, municipal utilities created barriers to rooftop solar, such as imposing monthly fees on solar owners or drastically undercompensating solar owners when they sell excess energy back to the grid, which is one of the ways owners recoup their solar installation costs. CEJA changed that, and now municipalities must allow for solar owned or owner using solar systems. So CEJA creates the right of all Illinoisans, including those of us who get our electricity from municipal and cooperative utilities, to generate, consume, and store electricity and to deliver excess electricity to the grid. It also requires that solar owners be paid fair compensation for excess electricity delivered to the grid and prohibits the imposition of excessive fees. But please remember that CEJA does not require the municipal and cooperative utilities to be regulated by the Illinois Commerce Commission or any other state authority. Therefore, CEJA does not mandate any kind of grid planning, state oversight of rate making, or consistent interconnection policies for municipal and cooperative utilities. These decisions are left for the city councils, village boards, and co-op boards. The Downstate Caucus of the Clean Jobs Coalition has identified at least 11 barriers that will need to be addressed by these governing bodies to bring municipal and cooperative utilities into the goals and objectives of CEJA. And we have those 11 issues listed here. And third, energy efficiency is a key part of the climate solution. Energy efficiency is about making improvements to new and existing buildings through things like insulation and efficient appliances in order to reduce the overall level of energy we use. Energy efficiency saves energy and saves money. CEJA extends Illinois' successful electric energy efficiency programs, which were set to expire in 2030. Now they'll continue saving consumers and businesses billions of dollars in years to come. It also requires more reporting from energy efficiency programs to ensure they are being implemented equitably. CEJA allows large energy customers to take advantage of efficiency programs, which help make the grid more resilient, lowers demand, and cuts costs for everyone. CEJA helps lower income families make energy efficiency improvements, as well as fix health and safety problems found in buildings when they do those upgrades. And finally, CEJA gives community groups a voice, allowing them to offer utilities guidance on efficiency programs. CEJA also directs the Capital Development Board to establish a stretch energy code that would allow municipalities, if they choose, to adopt a residential and commercial building code with higher energy efficiency outcomes than the statewide base code. If a community wants to go above and beyond how efficient they require new buildings to be, they can adopt this stretch code. The stretch code would also apply to all projects funded by the Capital Development Board. The final component of CEJA is electric transportation. Transportation is the #1 source of carbon emissions in Illinois and the United States. We have to take urgent action to begin to electrify our transportation sector, and CEJA started us on that path. CEJA commits millions of dollars over the next decade to expand access to and adoption of electric vehicles, or EVs, electric public transit, and electric trucks and buses. In addition, the bill aims to direct 40% of these transportation benefits to environmental justice and economically disadvantaged communities. A new rebate cycle just opened on November 1st and closes on January 31st, 2023. So anyone who purchases a new or used all-electric vehicle from a licensed Illinois dealer is eligible for a $4,000 rebate. And anyone who purchases a new or used all-electric motorcycle is eligible for a $1,500 rebate. And more information about who is eligible and how to apply is available at illinois.gov/EPA. CEJA also offers rebates for EV charging infrastructure in eligible communities. It requires ComEd and Ameren to file beneficial electrification plans and report on their efforts to electrify the transportation sector and manage the impacts of charging EVs on their grids. And finally, it creates an electric vehicle coordinator position at the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency to oversee all EV policy and projects delegated to the agency. So now that you've learned a few things about CEJA, I want to share with you how you can take action to continue to make sure our state stays a climate leader. The first thing you can do is thank legislators who voted yes on CEJA. For us in St. Charles, Geneva, and Batavia, those legislators are Karina Villa, Keith Wheeler, and Maura Hirschauer. The more legislators hear positive things from their constituents about this bill, the more likely they are to push for and pass similar bills in the future. And if you're interested at all, the next two slides you'll see I have the full roll call vote for both the House and the Senate. There's the House, and there's the Senate. So second, although solar power is a great investment, our city councils do need a push to make solar more accessible to their residents and businesses. Engage with your city council members and encourage them to make solar more accessible by exploring ways to eliminate caps on commercial and industrial solar projects, provide fair and reasonable compensation for solar generators, and adopt solar-friendly building codes. And finally, stay informed and get involved. We have a Tri-Cities Climate Action Team that meets every third Monday of the month at Geneva Public Library. We do this in person and by Zoom, and we would certainly welcome more members to work with us in that area. You can also get in touch with the Clean Jobs Coalition. The coalition can email you updates about CEJA, how it's being implemented, and ways you can become involved. And for those of you who belong to an organization that might be interested in becoming a coalition partner, you can contact the coalition at the email address here, and they will point you in the right direction for that organization to be part of the group. So I'll just leave it up here so that you can have those email addresses if you'd like them. I want to thank you for joining me tonight. And it was a pleasure to do this. And if you have questions, I will try to answer them or get you answers. Yes, Jim.
You expect continued efforts to whittle away at CEJA in the General Assembly. Do you think that's pretty well over, or what kinds of things should we be prepared for?
Well, I think that is always a possibility, maybe even a fear. And I personally think that that may come into play with this carbon capture thing. If Prairie State does succeed in getting investors to build a carbon capture system, they are saying that the cities will have no obligation to build this. They're looking to third-party investors to build it. But if they do build it, as I said, it's really very much of an experimental system. especially on power plants. And the fear is that as they get close to 2038 and the 45% reduction requirement, if they say are capturing 18%, that they'll go to the legislator and said, well, we're at 18%. We can't get to 45% just yet, so lower that number. So yes, I think there's a big fear that that could happen, especially with carbon capture. And of course, you all know that this was a very hard fought bill to get passed. So yeah, there are people out there looking to get rid of parts, if not all of it, you know. Bill?
So how much of our property does the TV typically have to, of the 50 megawatts?
55.
55, how much do we typically use?
Typically, it's somewhere in the 30 megawatts. I don't know, I don't know exactly what the amount is, and it probably does vary slightly from year to year, but it's 30 something, okay? And I brought my bill. So if you look at your Batavia electric bill, there is a line item on there, PPAF -0.1, excuse me, 0.01825. That's the multiplier. And then your charge is whatever it is. Mine has been averaging about $10 a month, but it depends upon your electricity usage. You know, so obviously a family with 5 is going to be using more than my husband and I. And we don't have electricities. No, we have electricity. We don't have air conditioning. So that's a huge, bill for a lot of people, so, but look at your bill. And a friend of mine, she looked at hers and she was paying $23 a month. So it does vary by your usage, but that's what we each pay. Each household, each ratepayer pays, for this electricity we are buying and don't need, Right.
Is there a benefit to, okay, so if the city can put up more charging stations and encourage people to use more electric vehicles, I'm trying to think, is there, I guess the gas stations would complain they're not for the city's, I guess not so negative. I'm trying to think, is there going to be a pushback from the city putting up charging stations when you're saying, hey, we're going to use more of.
Well, I think, I don't. Two things on that front. I think gas stations, I've not heard too much in the way of complaint. I mean, this is coming. Electric vehicles is coming. So gas stations are going to have to change. And I just read an article or saw an article that talked about, instead of, stopping for 5 minutes on your trip to, fill up your tank with gasoline and then going on your way, gas stations are going to probably have EV charging stations. You're going to be there for half an hour and they're going to have other things to entertain you or feed you or, things like that. So that's one thing. 2, and Bill, you know this because you were at the city council meeting on, or wait, no, you weren't. Did you listen to it online a little bit?
I was there. I was back in the corner.
Okay, Bill Kale was there. So just Tuesday night, Batavia's Climate Action Committee made recommendations for the city council to adopt. It was presented to the committee of the whole, not to the, so it was only up for discussion, not for any kind of an action, but the goal of the recommendations of the committee is to encourage more EV charging stations, encourage and incentivize where possible residents to to have EVs, to buy electric appliances, swap them out when your dryer breaks down, get rid of your natural gas dryer and get an electric dryer, go to heat pumps, go to, electric water heaters, those sorts of things. And the theory being that if more two theories. One, it's good for the environment. Natural gas is bad for the environment, okay? So, having electric appliances and other things is better for the environment. Number two, if we could start consuming more of that 55 megawatts of power, then that would reduce the cost for all of us on a monthly basis and open the door to possibly even exceeding the use of 55 megawatts of power and then turn to renewable energy to do that. Because Batavia, their contract for Prairie State electricity goes at least until 2042. And so we're not and it's a take or pay, and we're not getting out of taking that 55 megawatts of power any way, shape, or form. So we're stuck with it, so we might as well use it and help the environment at the same time.
Are they producing that much power, or they're capable of producing that much power? Meaning, as we increase our ramp up our electrical use, do they just then ramp up their coal burning, produce electricity? No.
So Prairie State is, I can't remember its total megawatt output, but NIMPA purchased, do you know, Bill?
Yeah, it's 1.6 gigawatts. It's two
1.6
800 megawatt plants.
Two 800 megawatt plants, 1.6 gigawatts. Okay. So there's 9 agencies that own it. NIMPA is one. Batavia, Geneva, and Rochelle are the 3 cities that are members of NIMPA. So that 55 megawatts is a fixed number. So Prairie State has to provide us with 55 megawatts of power.
We're not using it.
But we're not using it, right?
So they are still producing it?
Yes, we're buying it. We are buying 55 megawatts of power, sending it out to all of the community. And then whatever is not being used, they sell back at wholesale on the grid.
Sell it back at less than they paid.
Correct. And that's why there's that surcharge.
Well, for some reason, we can't see Bill, but we can hear him. So if you passed on the questions, then
I find it interesting, like Geneva has 3 charging stations. Okay, so they're encouraging people to charge. And Batavia has no such thing.
Well, I think we have charging stations down at City Hall, but you have to pay for them.
I just think it goes, why is Geneva giving you free electrical charging to the community?
That's something to ask the alderman about. That's why I think, we need more involvement, with people to actually ask them to do these things. Okay.
And there are municipal elections coming up in the spring. And that is something that is a big issue. To ask your potential alder people, what are their positions on things like that?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
Very
definitely.
important.
Did you hear that, Bill? Okay,
Good idea.
yeah, it is important. Any other questions? Patty?
So now, because of CEJA, I can get solar on my rooftop.
Yes,
Before, when we explored it, we could.
correct. So yes, that is true, okay? So prior to CEJA being passed, Batavia limited the number of people who could put solar on their houses, all right? I think that there are 23 houses in Batavia that have solar. They So at that time, when people were putting, so Batavia was severely limiting it, and I believe they also were prohibiting it for businesses to put on until one business said they'd leave town if they didn't get it. So they finally did work out an arrangement. I don't know anything about the particulars of that arrangement, but I understand that they did allow them to at least partially produce their own power through solar. So prior to CEJA, Batavia had what they call a net metering policy ordinance. So if you had your 15 kilowatt solar system and you used 13 kilowatts, you could sell back the 2 you didn't use and the city would reimburse you at a retail price. Okay, so for some people that helped them pay off the solar system. Since CEJA has required, CEJA required, Batavia and all the other municipal and co-op utilities to allow you to put solar on, but they also at the same time said you could do what's called net billing. So that's last March, Batavia switched from net metering to net billing. So now if you put a solar system on your roof, you obviously get the advantage of generating your own power and not buying it from the city of Batavia, but you're selling it back at a wholesale price to them for anything that you don't use, okay? So that did reduce the amount of money that people could make off their solar system for the parts that they didn't make. To the city council's credit, they didn't switch completely from retail to wholesale. They did step it down over a 3-year period, and they have wholesale plus a factor, a bonus, so to speak. And they stepped that down until I think in 2025, then it's strictly wholesale to sell back. But you're right, you can do it. You can definitely do it. And businesses can do it too. So, Jean?
So I understand that there's a push to get electric school buses. Have you heard about that? That because they don't go very far, and that they're likely to come up in the legislature?
I don't know a lot about electric school buses. I know that the Inflation Reduction Act had a large sum of money to electrify school buses across the United States, and I believe 15 school districts were awarded money for electric school buses. Now, there was probably other factors that figured in here like equity, and I know one of the school districts, several of the school districts are in central and southern Illinois. So I think, for example, one of them is Edwards County School District. I think it's a county-wide school system, so it probably has a lot of buses because it picks up kids for the whole county. I know they were one that won the awards. Bill, do you know more about school buses at all?
No, I'm the power plant guy. I don't know
He's
much
a
about
power
solar
plant
power.
guy.
I don't know much about solar power. I figure
Okay.
you guys are all going to figure it out. Everybody wants solar power. You guys are going to figure it out. It's all good. I do know this much though, that if you have the ability to put solar panels on your roof, you may have too much shade. You can't do it. But if you do and you're not doing it, you're actually paying a premium to keep using electricity instead of doing solar panels. People kind of miss that. They keep thinking when they hear somebody from Cub or come through and give the big solar panel presentation, they're always left with kind of a feeling of, I don't know, that sounds too good to be true. And they're kind of hesitant. I know the city of Elgin has community solar available. You can sign up and get a 20% discount. There's only a couple hundred people signed up. Everybody else is like not heard of it or afraid of it. It's like you almost can't give it away. But yeah, it's a good thing.
But it is, and it's improving all the time.
Could people hear Bill or do you?
Yeah, I heard him say community solar
In Elgin, but see, Elgin is not a utility, yeah, they're a ComEd customer, right? And Aurora is too. So they can do that because, so they can do that, but not us. Not us. There's 32 there's the 3 members of NIMBA, 32 municipalities are members of IMEA. And then there's cooperatives, lots of little cooperatives downstate. So, but yeah, so I don't know anything other than that, Jean. It's not been something that I've run across. I know CEJA encourages that. But I don't know more than that about, how good they are or how long they can run or anything like that for school buses.
I would wonder with school buses if those kinds of programs would only apply if the buses were run and owned by school district versus like the CEJA where we.
Not necessarily, Patty. I don't know, but not necessarily. As I said, I think they also, I do believe that this award that was made, so they're looking at partly at, air quality, for the communities that have poor air quality, and they, are kind of factor that into whether they get these electric buses versus the diesel buses.
That's a major issue
Mhm.
because so often school buses just stand there with the
And
motor
idle.
running. And kids are inhaling it, and one child died who had asthma. because of
Right.
that.
And then if they are living in, the south side of Chicago where the air quality isn't good because of all the industry there, then this just exacerbates that, right? So,
What would be the cost of switching from natural gas to electricity? I haven't looked recently at the rate change and cost of clean natural gas. Natural gas is very cheap things, right?
I believe it is. Bill, I don't know that. I don't know that at all. I've not gotten into prices, and the prices are in flux quite a bit. Prairie State is not cheap electricity, right, Bill?
It gets complicated, but no, basically it's kind of expensive. Everybody pays about $0.10 a kilowatt hour, plus or minus a penny or two now and then. It depends on, I don't think they have hourly charges. ComEd, you can sign up for a program that varies. If you don't use it during the peak hours, you get a discount. And I don't know that any of the local municipalities are allowing that yet. Geneva has it for industry. They have a new program for industry can sign up for demand reduction, they call it, so that they don't use so much during the peak hours when it's so expensive. But I don't think they have it for residents yet. And I don't know how much it costs for Prairie State. We're always trying to figure that out. How much does it cost? How much is the electric power for Prairie State as opposed to how much you're paying just for the transmission lines to get it up here at the transmission cost, as opposed to how much is for your bonds. Each one of the 3 communities have different bonding levels, and all of that stuff gets kind of blended into your bill.
Right.
Yeah,
So
we
that-
would like to figure the details out of that, but that
Yeah,
requires
we
some
should
more digging.
probably do that at some point, but he's absolutely right, because so the price of our electricity is not just for the electricity, but it's also for the bonds, and we have, I think Batavia has 3 bond issues related to Prairie State. There was the original construction, I think there was a added construction, and is there an operation too, Bill?
I think there was an environmental upgrade.
Environmental upgrade, okay, so we've got these, and that was one of the factors with CEJA and these municipalities. Originally, the Clean Energy Jobs Act was trying to get Prairie State closed by 2035. That's what the original bill called for. But because of the municipalities negotiating and arguing, the big part is they wanted it pushed back to the 2045 date because of these bonds expiring. It varies with from city to city or co-op to co-op, but roughly between 2035 and 2042, 43, something like that. And I know Batavia's are 2043, I believe, when our bonds will be paid off. So that was one big factor. They wanted Prairie State to stay up and running while they were still paying it off. So, but so it is, and as the renewables get cheaper, hopefully, then obviously Prairie State will get much more expensive or be more expensive in comparison to renewables.
Yeah, trying to figure out the price, because it's hard to tell. On average, we're about, if it's 10 cents, 12 cents, that's what Naperville pays, and Elgin kind of pay similar numbers.
Right, so that's kind of what the ComEdit rate is roughly.
Yeah.
Mhm. Right, so, yeah, and Bill, I have here, so we used 482 kilowatts. Good, is that right? No, that's not. I can't be right.
For the whole year.
Oh, yeah. Well, they're saying for the present reading. So it must be a fraction of a kilowatt. That must be a fraction of that. So we paid $50.07 for 482 something.
That's a problem. It's always like kilowatt per hour, kilowatt hours.
Right.
And it's 3 different-
Yeah, yeah, so whatever. So, any
I
other?
think that all of the various groups that comprise Prairie State could get together and lobby and do something. I mean, there's power in numbers, and maybe there's only 3 of us in NIPA.
Okay,
23 and.
I have,
or whatever.
I have a response to that. The contract we signed for electricity with Prairie State, or the contract NIMPA signed and IMEA signed, has a confidentiality agreement in it. And the contract between NIMPA and Batavia and Geneva, and the contract between IMEA and St. Charles have confidentiality agreements.
What does that mean?
They don't share any information with anybody. There is no transparency at all. Lona and I went to a few NIMPA board meetings, And they do everything in executive session.
How is that legal? How is
There,
that legal?
there is a provision in the Open Meetings Act that says that municipal power agencies can go into closed session to discuss contracts for the sale, purchase, and delivery of electricity. And they interpret that to mean virtually everything that Prairie State does. And it's, as far as I know, that's not been challenged. So that, I mean, that's a possible.
Well, actually, there's a whole bunch of us involved. It's not just 3 communities or 23 communities, there's a lot of communities. And if the, I mean, there's power in numbers. You know, if we could get people on the same page for this day and age, it's pretty good.
Well, I think,
Lobby for information for one,
right,
because I think that is, I'm amazed.
right. So I think, you know, speaking only, you know, with regard to Batavia City Council, but this is typical of most, you know, elected boards and councils and what have you. They're not experts on electricity. They don't know anything about electricity or the delivery of electricity. They often want to become part of the city council for reasons other than being the owner of a utility. And they look to the staff to provide them with all the information they need and want. And I think the other thing too, Patty, I think you ask, I don't know, I bet most residents in Batavia don't know where their power comes from, much less anything related to any of these problems, you know. I know I was at one meeting and somebody from Batavia asked if we get nuclear power, if our electricity comes from nuclear plants. Well, but yeah, I mean, it's a sticky problem. It is a real sticky problem.
The CEJA that you're talking about, the regulation, state law, all these goals by date, by decades, half decades, eliminate carbon producing generation. Who's done the math? Where is all that power that's being eliminated going to now come from?
Okay,
Who's putting up the capital if it's all gonna be clean power? Who's putting up all the windmills? Because we have no waterfalls here.
right.
Hydro generation.
And
Where's the map?
I know that there was math involved. Did you hear that at all, Bill? He's asking.
Yeah, I did hear that. He's talking about, there's two different things happening here, is getting to renewable energy is behind the meter and utility scale. And the behind the meter is the stuff you put on your house, the solar panels and stuff like that. And it's not really factored in too much to the math per se. What you're asking about is utility scale replacements, and that has to be allowed to and be permitted and developed to go on to the grid. And there's a PJM grid up in northern Illinois and a MISO grid in central and southern Illinois. And both of them have what's called a queue. That's a lineup of many projects waiting to get on there, get through the process so they can get on board. I don't remember how much of it there is. I'd like to use the phrase that the chairman of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, called FERC, used when he was talking to the grid operators about getting their act together and get going. We have to prepare ourselves for the coming tsunami of clean energy. There is literally tons and tons of stuff out there that are trying to get developed, and there's a bottleneck with the grid system. This was addressed recently with MISO specifically because they've had a huge price spike in the spring. And they had already spent 2 years doing a planning system to get more on the market. And they were going to put up a new grid system across northern Minnesota, which would be a nice start, but help a little bit. But after the big price spike in the spring hit them because of too much early premature closure of coal plants, because natural gas plants are putting them out of business. Not, but a little bit clean energy too, but mostly it's natural gas plants for putting coal plants out of business. And they got like a mismatch on how much they thought was going to be left. The prices spiked. So now they're putting $10 billion into expanding that grid as much as they can during the next decade. So there's an enormous amount of clean energy coming. You just don't see it yet. There's been these bottlenecks with the grids and delays with all these different versions of trying to get the financing in line. But yeah, it's coming. There's going to be a ton of clean energy happening. That's not the problem.
Yeah, the other thing I was just going to say, and I don't know the specifics because I was not involved at all with the, writing the bill and actually, doing any of the policy decisions with regard to that. But in addition to the Clean Jobs Coalition being part and pushing for this bill, part of the negotiating also included utilities, and they did include labor. And it included, the EPA and other organizations. So I believe that there were some calculations that were done that projected that these dates were achievable, that they weren't just kind of pulled out of a black hat, like a rabbit, is in terms of, I don't know the specifics, but I believe that there was some calculation that was done. And certainly there were enough different and disparate interests participating in the negotiation to make sure that those numbers lined up to be realistic.
I mean, power consumption has to work.
Mm-hmm.
Generation is taken offline. Something else has to be
Right.
need for power and energy to increase. You
Right.
can't just replace what you're taking offline.
Correct.
You gotta magnify it.
Right.
And if
Definitely.
it's all wonderful, I'm talking industry.
Right. Exactly. Right. Because especially since the push is for more electric vehicles and everything else, that's a huge increase in consumption. And therefore it has to be produced too, generated. Exactly. Right. So, Bill?
I suspect what's gonna happen, you're gonna see a lot more microgrid stuff popping up versus the big entire grid. You look at University of Illinois Champaign, and they have a 60 megawatt usage. And it took them about 20 years to get to about 30 megawatts, and then it's gonna take them another 20 years to finish up. Their entire microgrid will be renewable. It is taking them 30 years, so they can manage that because it's all that one entity at 6 megawatts. And you probably see a lot of those popping up where these 50 to 60, 50 to 80 ones are being done. But I'm not sure how they're gonna do the big ones, like in the city of Chicago, which are 10 times that number. You're gonna see a lot of other ones popping up anyway.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that goes hand in hand with this is this grid upgrading that needs to happen too. The way, and just very simply, the way the grid was built here in the United States was with these big plants. Power plant here and a power plant here and a power plant there. But I think with this renewable, it's going to come down to, like Bill said, more micro generation. And so the grids need to be modified and improved to accommodate these small generators coming in and off of line as they have power and what have
So
you.
if you read these programs, we participated, we didn't win. They have these programs where national labs and industry and university contribute, and they come up with ideas, and then they fund them. So the biggest issue is how do you merge renewables onto the big grids because it's not easy to do right now. We don't have a solution to turn on a bunch of solar, then turn off, and turn on, turn off. We don't have a really good solution for that to expand it right now. So that's part of the problem. DOE recognizes that,
Mm-hmm.
and they're giving out lots of, so everyone's competing to figure out a lot of universities. Power plants which are the produce power is one, but when you have all these other little producers everywhere, it's a nightmare to mesh them all.
Right, right,
And so they're trying to figure out a way to actually do it with smart technology, right?
right,
It's just not there yet.
right, right. But it's, yeah, things are coming. Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. And kind of that goes kind of back to this whole thing with Batavia and solar too, because you have to remember that, for years and years and years, Batavia sent the electricity out to everybody. It was a one-way street from wherever we get our electricity to all the customers. And once you start installing solar systems on roofs of businesses, now you have this bi-directional thing that has to work without interrupting, power from the people who don't have the solar. So, takes a lot of work. Takes a lot of work.
Susan,
Yes.
I found already reference here for the grid and new energy coming on. This is from MISO itself. That's the grid for central southern Illinois. It's a very, very large area they cover from Canada to Louisiana, but it also includes most of Illinois. And their press release from September 27th, just this year, says MISO received another record-setting number of submittals during the 2022 Generation Interconnection K application period. So you gotta love this stuff when you get involved with power. It's full of all kinds of legal details and engineering and numbers and stuff like that. So there's something called the Generation Interconnection K. So when these people decide they're going to build a solar panel farm of some kind, they have to submit to the grid to say, can we connect? They can't just go over to the local power place and just plug it in. So there's a whole process of evaluation of how it's all going to happen, and it takes a couple of years to set it up, and that's while they're sitting in the K. It said the interconnection request included 950 applications representing 171 gigawatts of new generation. Remember, Prairie State, as big as it is, and it's a huge plant, is 1.5 gigawatts. So here you are sitting there on the interconnection K right now, 171 gigawatts of new generation. So it'll take a while to get online, but there's lots and lots of it out there.
That's renewable then, right, Bill?
Yeah, mostly wind power from the middle America.
Okay. So. I have a little bit of an answer. So. Anything else? Well, this is a wonderful discussion. Thank you so much. Thanks. I wish more people could have heard, but.
Well, if the sound and all works, we'll post it on the website.
That sounds wonderful, Jean. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.